Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm Alan, the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast, and today's Tolkien Times is my way of bringing you a little Middle-earth every single day. Now, of course, if the few minutes you get here isn't enough, be sure to listen to the Prancing Pony podcast. 7 years worth of long episodes. We're talking an hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes more, as we walk our way through the Legendarium. But let's get started today with Tolkien Tuesday. Now, we're going to use this time on Tuesdays to look more closely at Tolkien himself, and not just his subcreation. We're going to look at excellent biographies, including the must-read volumes like Carpenter's Biography, J.R.R. Tolkien, Tom Shippey's Author of the Century, and John Garth's Tolkien and the Great War. And we'll also sneak a look at some of his own writings as well, essays like On Fairy Stories, his poem Mythopoeia, but especially Carpenter's volume of Tolkien's letters. And today, that's where we'll start. But not quite where longtime listeners expect me to. I am sure that many of you are placing bets or lining up shot glasses waiting for me to say letter number 131. Now, a quick aside to those of you who don't know what I'm talking about yet, the letter has been so frequently cited on the podcast that it became a square on the listener bingo cards, and disclaimers had to be issued for drinking games lest folks suffer alcohol poisoning. No, I want to start with letter number 131, a lengthy excerpt of which is included in the preface of the Silmarillion, where it is simply known as From a Letter by J.R.R. Tolkien to Milton Waldman, 1951. But to do the letter justice, I have to take you back a little over a year prior to 1950. Now, about the time that Tolkien was trying to wrap up The Lord of the Rings for Allen and Unwin, he was introduced to an editor with another publishing house in London, Collins. The editor's name was Milton Waldman, and he was very interested in both The Lord of the Rings and the Silmarillion, which Tolkien desperately wanted published with The Lord of the Rings. Now, he showed Waldman parts of the Silmarillion, and Waldman said he'd publish it if Tolkien finished it. Then Tolkien showed him The Lord of the Rings, and Waldman wanted to publish that as well. But Waldman knew that Tolkien was with Allen and Unwin, and he told Tolkien that he could only offer to publish his works if he had, quote, no commitment, either moral or legal, to Allen and Unwin. Now, with that in mind, here is a bit of letter number 123, also written to Milton Waldman in February 1950. As soon as I had dumped the manuscript of The Lord of the Rings on you, I felt bad about it, weighing down your holiday with a labor that only an author's egotism could have inflicted at such a time. And examining my conscience, I had to confess that, as one who has worked alone in a corner and only had the criticism of a few like-minded friends, I was moved greatly by the desire to hear from a fresh mind whether my labor had any wider value or was just a fruitless private hobby. All the same, I don't think that in fact I burdened you under false pretenses. I believe myself to have no legal obligation to Allen and Unwin, since the clause in the Hobbit contract with regard to offering the next book seems to have been satisfied, either A, by their rejection of the Silmarillion, or B, by their eventual acceptance and publication of Farmer Giles. I should, as you note, be glad to leave them, as I have found them in various ways unsatisfactory. But I have friendly personal relations with Stanley, whom all the same I do not much like, and with his second son Rayner, whom I do like very much. It has always been supposed that I am writing a sequel to The Hobbit. Rayner has read most of The Lord of the Rings and likes it. As a small boy, he read the manuscript of The Hobbit. Sir Stanley has long been aware that The Lord of the Rings has outgrown its function, and is not pleased, since he sees no money in it for anyone, so he said. But he is anxious to see the final result all the same. If this constitutes a moral obligation, then I have one, at least to explain the situation. Did I say something of all this in my letter of December 13th? I certainly meant to. However, I certainly shall try to extricate myself, or at least the Silmarillion and all its kin, from the dilatory coils of Allen and Unwin, if I can, in a friendly fashion, if possible. Now, we'll leave that there for now and come back to look at his later letters to Allen and Unwin about both works before we eventually make our way to letter number 131. But I am excited for Tolkien Tuesdays because there's so much about Tolkien that will bring even more joy to your reading of the Legendarium. Just wait until we spend a dozen Tuesdays in a row talking about Tolkien's love for Edith and her inspiration of Luthien. For now, though, plan on joining me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for the very first Word Nerd Wednesday. Now, please like and subscribe on YouTube, and if you're listening on a podcast app, be sure to subscribe to make sure every episode gets downloaded to your device. Follow at Tolkien Times on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And in the words of Faramir, go with the goodwill of all good men.